And I'm Davin, and I'm a game development instructor at the University of Hawaii West Oahu's Academy for Creative Media. When I assigned my class their final project with the only formal instruction being to make a video game that's respectable in less than a semester's worth of time, I had no idea what the outcome would be. Since video game development incorporates all of the traditional arts with math, science, and engineering, I was happy to learn that the entire class decided to pool all of their various talents together and form their own virtual studio. They work remotely, and I think in the end, they created a game that even surprised themselves. So I would like to introduce to you three of the leaders of the teams, the various teams of the group. And Michelle, do you want to go?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Zheng. I was the project manager of this project, as well as a writer, and I also helped with just organization of the team. You can go ahead and go next, Jordan.
Hi, my name is Jordan Balasteros. I was the head programmer, editor, and item artist.
Hey, hi, I'm Brittany Lindo. I was the head artist, writer, and composer for this game.
Very good. Thank you for your intros. So without further ado, I present to you University of Hawaii West Oahu's game design and development final project and the process that it took to make it.
Can you guys see the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the title of our game is called Dating and Delivery. And before we begin, we would like to share a quick video that showcases how the gameplay works as well as what you'll see inside the game. So we did our introductions earlier, but our little mini studio that we came up with in class is also known as 12% Studios. We came up with this name as we were working together, and we wanted something that seemed fitting for all of us. So here's our titles again. But also, besides the three of us here, we had an awesome team of colleagues and classmates that helped bring this game to life. Each of them are amazing writers, artists, and coders that are all just college students. So a big shout out to them because this game wouldn't be possible without them as well. So now we're going to get into the main backstory of the process. And a little fun fact about our little studio is that some of us have never met in person at all. So the question becomes, how did you develop a game then? We all met in CM 342 in spring 2021 with one goal, as Davin said earlier, to create a game by the end of the semester. And at the end of the semester, we were at a pretty good place, but it wasn't a full game. So we took it outside of the class because as each of us developed our skills in coding, writing, and art, everything kept inspiring each other. As the coding improved, we were able to do more and more things with the writing, and the writing just fed into more and more creativity with the art, and the art just inspired more and more in the cycle. So we took this project after the semester ended, and we worked on it during the summer, and it's just been a work in progress ever since. It's still getting updates. Jordan and all of us are still constantly working on it, and we're very proud to where it is right now. Our primary communication method throughout this whole process was via Discord, a communication app where we can organize different channels and we can deviate different tasks and by different rooms. So you can see on screen we have little panels, areas of group management, game art, assets, writer's room, coding, music hall, as well as like sending each other the final assets of things. Besides the work of everything, we also just use the Discord to also just hang out after class at night, just to talk and just hang out with each other. So you might be wondering, what is a dating game? What is a dating sim and why? We couldn't really find a formal definition, but Wikipedia defines dating sims as a video game subgenre of simulation games with romantic elements. Like Davin said earlier, we were just prompted, come up with a game. And in that class, we partnered up and created different game pitches. We were all coming up with different ideas. We said top-down RPGs, gotcha games, platformers, first-person shooters, etc. We all just, we were all gamers at heart. So coming up with different games that we were all passionate about was not very difficult. But then we thought, what is codable? What can we do with our expertise and our experience? What can we do in 3 months' time? Then one of our colleagues came up with the idea of a dating sim. Dating sims are like visual novels, but with choice. So like a digital version of a choose your own adventure game, but with romantic elements as well. And dating sims and simulation games have been very popular nowadays, from internet culture as well as streamer and influencer culture. And at the time of creating this, we were all still in the middle of the pandemic, and simulation games such as dating sims provided escapism, the opportunity to meet someone new, to talk to someone different, to try something new. And some examples of similar games we drew inspiration from was Monster Prom, Stardew Valley, and others. So the main reason why we chose this simulation game was because the main character, or the player character who you would be playing as, is meant to be a stand-in for you. And you can see yourself in those shoes as you make your decisions navigating across this world. Now we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about our dating game. So the purpose of the game, you have a goal, you defeat all the monsters, get this character, yada yada. Our goal for this game was to gain the affection of one of the 4 eligible monsters and go on a date with them. At every interaction you have with them, you will gain a certain amount of affection points, and at the end of a positive interaction with them, you'll be up a certain amount of affection points. And once you gain affection points, you're going to continue with story advancements. And you might think, okay, easy, I'll just talk to the same monster over and over again, talk to them until they fall in love with me. However, it's not as easy as you think, because we implemented a day-night cycle. You have a certain amount of time slots where you can only meet certain characters at certain times. For example, we have a vampire character, and you can only talk to her at night. So you have to plan wisely about how to spend your time during each of the days. So we have a morning, noon, evening time. How well do you plan your time to meet these certain monsters? And it's not just about talking. We also have gift giving, shopping, and minigame and hangout sessions. So you can get to know the monsters and figure out, who do you want to get to know better, even more in a romantic sense. And also just, hang out and maybe just learn more about. So here are a few screenshots from different games that we drew inspiration from. And aesthetically followed in the footsteps of these anime-style games because they were cutesy, simple and charming, and you can tell a lot by the character just by their design and how they look. So now I'm going to throw it over to Brittany about the art behind it.
Right, thanks, Michelle. So we're starting with the sketch conceptuals. We had a lot of artists that had experience with digital art, so we didn't start off with traditional paper and pencil, and we jumped right into digital programs like Photoshop, Paint Tool Sign. And this is an important step since we need to figure out how we want our game to look like. What do we want our logos to be? What kind of icons? What our UI? Just everything to plan out from the very base bones to the final product. And before that, we had to use placeholders that you see on the bottom right to figure out how we had to size the characters. Do we want portraits? Do we want full size, minimal size? Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is some examples of our item art here. So each of our monsters run a specific shop. And we had to think, what items will they sell? Like the bartender, the baker, the makeup artist. These are just samples of some items that we came up with in a variety of styles, pixel to realism. And as you can see from the art styles, they vary between them. The ones on the left are using the mini games, while items on the right were integral to the story experience. Next slide, please. And then here we have some early sketches of the backgrounds. We had to figure out how to lay down the framework. We figured out where we're going to place the chairs, where we're going to place the monster. How is this space going to look like? Since the dating sim is very visual, we need to figure out what color palettes, the items, furniture, just to make the world breathe and come to life. This gave us a rough idea for some of our finished pieces that you'll see in the next slide, which is right here. So here's some background art rendered for the different locations on the map. We have the bakery, the bookstore, Rosie's house, as well as the post office. So each location is relevant to our game in either the main story location or as side locations for mini games and hangout events. And next slide. So then we also have early versions of the map. So this is actually an inspiration of a real place called Inokashira in Japan. And these are some of our earliest sketches. We were planning out the town, like a little club area. It was a very messy layout. And then we had to do an overlay of where the building should go. So every step of the way, we had to kind of double check ourselves to make sure, do we want this here? Do we want this character here? Do we really need this place or not? Is this interactable? Is it not? Next. And then here we have our final version. So the map in layman's terms is essentially our main hub on where you go next. This is the main screen that players will always see when you transition from one scene to the next. This is the scene that you will always see, whether you're going to visit a monster, go on a hangout, maybe play a mini game. This all starts here. And if we go to our next slide, welcome to our reject gallery. These are the characters that did not, unfortunately, make it into our game. So before you meet our actual cast, this is our selection of rejects. They were rejected due to some resembling other monsters. Some didn't quite fit the theme or story we were going to use moving forward. And others made it far, but ultimately got cut off in favor of monsters that would be more recognizable, like the vampire, or like the spider lady who almost made it, but not quite. So each of them had different designs, but none of them made it past the sketch phase after the voting and vetoes. But in the next slide, I'll introduce you to our very first monster that made it in. Okay, I'd like to introduce you to Rosie Maple. So Rosie actually was not supposed to be in this game, but we all fell in love with her design on the top left. And each artist started building on what would she be? What kind of moth is she? Is she a Rosie Maple moth? Is she a poodle moth? But she is not a romanceable option in this game. Instead, she is your very best friend, who is your tutorial. She'll tell you around the town. She'll tell you how you're doing with all the other monsters. And she was actually originally based off of Mothman, which Michelle did have her as a character to write for. So do you want to talk about her a little bit?
Yeah, I can totally talk about Rosie. So I was the main character writer for Rosie Maple, and it was really important when I was developing her character that she wasn't too annoying. As Brittany stated earlier, she was a tutorial character. And if you've played any games before, before you go exploring, you need to learn the basics of how to interact with things. What can you interact with? And I wanted Rosie to be a welcoming arms when you enter this monster world. So she's not very intimidating. She's a moth, but she's still fuzzy and everything. So that's the main thing when I was trying to write for Rosie, just to, she's your best friend, That's the way I would word it.
Okay, and meet our cast. So these are the monsters that made it through and are in our actual game. We have Isaac Underdark. He is the Beholder bookshop keeper with his sister Iris Underdark, a Cyclops makeup artist. Shannon Wolf, he is our werewolf baker, and Natalie Julep, our vampire bartender. As you can see from the reject gallery, we essentially started out with 8 characters with 4 per gender. However, due to time constraints and delivering in our actual time, ability, we had to narrow it down to only 2 per gender in order to make this game actually a feasible play state. So in our next slide, we have our character sheets. So before we actually started narrowing down, we made each character a character sheet that had their schedules in the game, their end goals, their names, biography, the time the shop would be open, when you could talk to them. It was important to have this template so we could see for ourselves and also use the baseline for every person who worked in this game. From the coder to the artist to the writer, we all had to have access and also approve of each stage of these characters, since we all had a hand in bringing these characters to life. The coders would decide how they would talk and act, the artists would decide their theming and what they would look like, and the writers had to write out their personality that the player would eventually fall in love with. At the time of development, we couldn't realistically include everything in the sheets. So we had what we had and voted on who would be in the game and what features would be added. As you can see from Natalie and Isaac, they all had differing information that made it to the game or were cut out. And now I'm going to pass it over back to Michelle, and she will talk to you about the writing.
Thank you very much, Brittany. All right, now that you got a little taste of the characters, we're going to talk a little bit about the writing process behind them. During that initial class discussion, we had a general understanding of the personalities of the characters, but we didn't know the fine details. We know that each of the characters would be given a certain difficulty level. We didn't want every character to be easy. So, you would have to make more difficult choices depending on which character you're going for. For example, for our easy route is Shannon, who is our werewolf. He's like a puppy dog. Puppy dogs are easy to interact with. Versus our difficult character, which was Iris, who is a beholder, who, traditionally is like a monster. It's very hard to get to know her. And the way we divided up this work was that we luckily had one writer for each of the characters. And the reason why we split it up that way was because we wanted each character to be very distinct from each other. We didn't want it to feel like one person was writing for it all. And I know that in traditional writing, it's also one writer would have to write for multiple characters, but we had the luxury and opportunity that each of our writers could tackle their own character, and we were lucky enough that they could choose which one they felt like they were comfortable with or they wanted the challenge on taking on. Because similar to people in real life, sometimes conversations aren't the easiest to navigate through. And even the simplest response, you think choosing between one option or two options, that can make a huge impact on the game. And as writers started to share their drafts and coders started to advance their skills, we were able to implement very cool conversations. For example, something that wasn't in our original draft developed early on, but later on during the summer, was that our coders were able to do like a repeat function where in the first scene with Rosie, you're allowed to choose which shop you want to visit. And as I mentioned before, Natalie's a vampire. You can't visit her at night, but she shows up as an option. But when you click on Natalie, it'll show up, hey, you can't visit there, it's closed right now, and you can keep clicking on it, and we have a little reward at the end that we'll explain a little bit later, but that's kind of behind our writing process. Okay, so you saw those little branches earlier, right? But let me introduce you to a little thing, or well, big thing, called Rosie's post-40 scene. After you've interacted with each of the characters at least once, you'll unlock Rosie's post-40 scene, where she asks you, did anyone catch your eye? And this is an opportunity, so now that you've met all the characters, you can talk to Rosie about how your interaction went with them. It's kind of like, you check up with, you just went on a date, and then your best friend's checking up on you, like, how did it go? Who did catch your eye? And depending on which of the 4 characters that you talk to, depending on if you had a positive, negative, or neutral reaction with them, you'll get different responses. And we as writers had to plan for every single one of those. So I'm not going to do the math right now, but there's 4 characters, and each of them have 3 options. And then within those 3 options, they also have maybe like 1 or 2 options within there. And that's what grew into this like monstrosity right here. And, the reason why we have this, even though it was a lot of work on writers, is because depending on the choices you've made, we want to reward you with different and unique dialogue options. You went through all the work to getting to know this character, you should get a unique response for going through all that work. And this story is not just a one-choice path. You have options, and it should affect the story and affect your gameplay experience with it. So this is what you see on the back end of all the writing. But now what you see on the front end in the game is all you see is this. All you see is this. But now we're going to go into the coding, which you'll see this post-40 scene turns into this.
Now we're going to get into a bit of technical talk, so please bear with us. So we chose Fungus, which is our main hub for coding. And for people that are not too sure about coding, usually if you've seen a movie or something that has coding, usually it's like these green letters that are flying across the screen and somebody is tapping away extremely fast on their keyboard. And while that is one of the most common ways of coding, because of our skills at the time, we chose fungus because it's a visual style of coding. As you can see on the bottom right, it works with blocks and wires, and so they connect to each other. It's like, here is where you are, and then we move to the next one once you're done with it. And this is the very, very basis of how our coding works. The other reason why we decided to use this program was because fungus also is very good at specializing in specific game types, and dating sim is one of them. So of course, why not use it? For the people that are having a very difficult time understanding the difference between line code and visual code, imagine line code like a movie script where it shows all the directions on the piece of paper as just words. You have to read through it and understand what's going on. And for some people, that might be difficult to understand. But for visual code, it's like a storyboard where you have the words paired with a picture to give somebody, or the actor in this case, an easier understanding of what is going on. Next slide. So this is where things get a bit confusing to look at. As you can see on the top, we have these very simple things. Like I showed earlier, you have a few blocks on the very top. And it's like, you have very simple scenes where it's a couple interactions with a character. But on the bottom, we have things that are very, very complicated, and the game needs to be tracking so many different things at once. And that's kind of what you see right now. Next slide. So I want to go over this thing we call the Isaac template. As we've introduced earlier, Isaac is our character on the left there. Because Brittany wrote for Isaac, she really, really wanted to have Isaac in this game. And so she busted her butt to get all of the writing out for Isaac. And because of that, he was the first character that had everything done for him. All the writing was completely done. And so he kind of led the charge when it came to coding other characters. As you can see on the right-hand side, there's Isaac's code, and underneath it is Natalie's code. You can see that they look very similar, but with like little changes in some of the blocks look like a different color. And that's because we wanted, or what we as the coders did was, Isaac was done. Why not copy and paste and just change around the things that need to be changed around? And that's kind of what we've done. It's a very good way for beginners to understand that you don't need to be writing everything from scratch. You don't need to write a character from the scratch all the time. Take inspiration from one character and move them to the other, with changes, of course. You don't want them to be completely cut and dry. Next slide, please. So now we want to go over this mini game kind of thing that we had in our game. And so why have a mini game? What we wanted to do was we wanted to keep retention. Even though we can make dialogue choices and different story choices, the player might get kind of bored. And so we have this mini game that is a very, very common thing that the player is going to have to go through because of the function. And the idea is that in this mini game, you take some of these icons and you place them in a box and you send them off like a delivery, of course. Our game's name is Dating and Delivery. If we didn't have a delivery system, what's the point? So through this, your player can get some kind of item from it. And it's usually money, or like we've had earlier, we said there's gift giving. And so sometimes you can get lucky and you get a gift for a character that you like. And you can give it to them and it's like a bonus. And that's kind of what this mini game is meant to be. Next slide. So with all of these things in mind, we have this thing called juiciness. And for the people that do not know juiciness, it's this kind of idea that keeps the player immersed in the game. It keeps them in the mindset that they're not pressing buttons on a controller or pressing buttons on a keyboard or moving a mouse around to click things. It's I'm in the game and I'm playing as this character. I am the character, and that's kind of this immersion that you have. And so little things make the difference when it comes to immersion. And so we have things like Easter eggs. Like we said earlier, if you visit the bar at night with Natalie, our character on the right, since she's a bartender, you can go in there and get drinks. If you drink too much, of course, you're expected to get drunk. And we wanted, as the coders, we wanted to add this layer into the game. And so as you slowly drink and you slowly get drunk, you pass out. And like we've said before, there are time slots. If you get pass out drunk, you lose time. Instead of waking up in the morning, you wake up later on in the day and you've lost time. And of course, since our game is based around managing your time and that strategy, it's, even though it might be cool to see from a writing standpoint, it, as a player playing the game, it might not be something you want to do. These things give pop to the game. It's meant to be this fun thing, even though it might seem minuscule. Like Michelle said earlier, the very first way we've done this was if you try and go to Natalie's bar during the day, Rosie will tell you, well, you can't go there. And so as you choose that option, Rosie tells you no, and the game has to spit out the option of choose it again. Here's all the options again. And if you try and kind of poke fun at Rosie and say, no, I want to go to the bar now, Rosie will slowly get more annoyed with you because you're still poking, I want to go there. And that adds that extra layer of immersion. And so eventually when Rosie will get fed up, she'll be like, no, and the option will completely disappear. And that's that layer of juiciness that we wanted. And this was getting that right is quite difficult because we need cohesion with our coders and our writers. And so as our writers were developing, they gave us the material to work with. And the coders saw this and we put it in the game and we're like, well, we can do a little more with this. And so we gave message to our writers and said, can you add these specific dialogue options to give this juiciness to our game? And so that was kind of this cycle loop of just writers would write, the coders would receive it, code it in, give requests, and just this loop, and it created so many cool parts to our game. Next slide.
So that was, I mean, it's still a work in progress. We're still experiencing problems and mistakes and coding errors still to this day. But our goals for the future, near future as well as far future, is that we're just going to continue game testing. Like Jordan said, we're still playing through all the games, finding all those spelling errors, finding all those places where players could break the game. And we're always going to constantly be editing it and updating it. And then soon enough, we're hoping that we can publish it on Steam, which is a game website to buy games, as well as some indie websites, and it'll be ready for commercial products soon enough.